Hello. Thank you for your interest in the transportation component of Phase 2 of the Redmond Zoning Code rewrite. I am Jeff Churchill, Long Range Planning Manager and lead for this project component. I will cover 5 proposals that together comprise the transportation component. The first topic is high-capacity transit corridor preservation. Redmond adopted high-capacity transit corridor preservation regulations in 2009 for the purpose of ensuring that new buildings were not built in the corridor for the light rail extension to Redmond. These regulations have served their purpose. In 2022, light rail construction is well underway. The proposal is to repeal these regulations since they are no longer needed. The next topic is minimum parking requirements for off-street parking. The Redmond Zoning Code identifies minimum and maximum parking requirements for each allowed use. The purpose of such requirements is to ensure that people arriving to a destination by car will be able to find a parking spot. Unfortunately, minimum parking requirements are often harmful. Minimum parking ratios are often set with little supporting data, and the supporting data usually assumes that parking will be free. Because the parking is assumed to be free, parking ratios are set too high. This has the effect of reducing the amount of land that can be used for socially beneficial uses like housing and businesses. When land is devoted to parking instead of to housing or business, it makes the urban landscape less attractive and generates less tax revenue to support public services and amenities. It also has the effect of encouraging driving, which exacerbates congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. Additionally, parking lots are pollution-generating impervious surfaces, the stormwater from which must be treated, which is also a cost. And finally, parking, especially in urban areas, is very expensive to build, and those costs are often passed on to renters and consumers. By reducing or eliminating required off-street parking, this proposal would improve the sustainability of the transportation system, protect the city's drinking water supply, about 40% of which is contained in a shallow, unconfined aquifer, increase opportunities for housing, especially affordable housing, and increase opportunities for jobs and other amenities. This proposal would reduce or eliminate minimum off-street parking requirements in Redmond's centers, that is, Overlake, downtown, and Marymore Village, and near frequent transit. Let's start with new development near frequent transit. Frequent transit is transit that comes every 15 minutes or better for at least 12 hours per day. For these areas, the minimum amount of parking would be reduced to 1/2 of a parking space per residential unit, 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for most commercial uses, 2.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for restaurants, and 1/2 of a parking spot per hotel room. In the parts of Redmond centers that are not near frequent transit, the minimum amount of parking would be the same as I just said, except that the minimum requirement for hotels would be a 1/4 space per room. Let's move on to the parts of Redmond centers that are within a 1/2 mile of frequent transit. For these areas, the minimum amount of parking would be reduced to 0 parking spaces for residential uses, 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for most commercial uses, 2.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for restaurants, and a 1/4 parking spot per hotel room. Maximum parking ratios would also be reduced. The greatest reductions would be in those parts of Redmond centers that are within a 1/2 mile of frequent transit. The reduction for residential uses would be to 1 parking space per unit. The reduction for most commercial uses would be to 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And the reduction for restaurants would be to 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. There are several other parking requirements proposed to be amended in conjunction with reducing or eliminating minimum parking requirements in some parts of Redmond. Combined, these proposals would improve access to businesses, incentivize non-motorized travel, and improve attractiveness of bicycle travel. We already know from downtown parking studies that there are some parts of downtown that experience an imbalance of parking supply and demand at certain times of day. This can make it difficult to find parking and often results in drivers circling the block, creating congestion. The proposal would authorize paid parking on-street to encourage turnover so that drivers could be confident that a spot would be open nearby. Second, the proposal would limit the number of compact stalls that could be allocated to the retail portion of a mixed-use building to 25%. Currently, this is not regulated. We hear complaints that newer parking structures are difficult to navigate and have too many compact stalls. This would ensure that most compact stalls are in the residential portion of garages, where drivers become very familiar with garage characteristics. Third, Redmond would end its in-lieu fee program for parking. The Downtown Parking Management Strategic Plan Implementation Plan does not call for a publicly funded parking facility. In addition, the city is not attempting to maximize parking production, so it no longer makes sense to continue this program. Fourth, this proposal includes a minor change related to off-site bicycle parking. Currently, off-site bicycle parking must be provided within 750 feet for non-residential uses. The maximum distance for off-site car parking is 600 feet, so the proposal makes the limits the same at 600 feet. Finally, this proposal addresses monthly on-street parking permits. The city sells a fixed number of monthly on-street permits. Anyone can purchase a permit. However, some people purchasing permits may also have access to parking in the building in which they live. Under this proposal, residents who decline on-site parking would not be eligible for a monthly on-street permit. Again, combined, these proposals would improve access to businesses, incentivize non-motorized travel, and improve attractiveness of bicycle travel. The next two slides address a variety of proposed amendments related to pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities. Taken together, these proposals would align regulations with draft Redmond 2050 policies, strengthen incentives and requirements related to the provision and maintenance of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities, and incentivize walking, bicycling, and using transit. The first item would add the Transportation Master Plan, the Parks, Arts, Recreation, Culture, and Conservation Plan, and the Redmond Zoning Code as documents with which new development needs to be consistent as it relates to pedestrian and bicycle facilities. This is more for clarity than anything else. Redmond's code already requires anyone proposing a temporary sidewalk closure to develop a safe detour. This proposal would require those proposing sidewalk closures to take all reasonable measures to minimize the duration of the closure and make adequate provisions for the safety, continuity, and convenience of pedestrian passage when the sidewalk is closed. In other words, it raises the bar, requiring consideration of continuity and convenience as well as safety. There is also a proposal to clarify that the basic minimum sidewalk width is 5 feet and that those 5 feet must be unobstructed. Fourth, the code currently requires the provision of transit shelters as part of new development wherever expected demand supports transit use. The proposal is to supplement this so that transit shelters are built along corridors where transit is planned in the future. Next, the zoning code requires sidewalk extensions to meet current standards and regulations, but makes exceptions for when there is limited right-of-way. This proposal would eliminate that exception so that any sidewalk extension would meet current standards and regulations. There are two proposals related to transportation management programs. These programs are known as TMPs, which can be confusing because TMP also has another meaning. These TMPs are requirements that apply to large developments that aim to reduce the amount of traffic generated during morning and afternoon peak hours. One requirement of a TMP is to provide a financial incentive equivalent to 25% of the value of a bus pass. The proposal is to encourage more transit usage by increasing the financial incentive to 100% of the value of a bus pass. The second proposed change is to list parking cash out as an acceptable financial incentive. Parking cash out programs are when an employer or building manager pays a person not to park in a structure or lot. Again, the purpose of these proposals is to align with transportation policy being developed as part of Redmond 2050 and to encourage walking, bicycling, and transit use. The last transportation topic concerns street and access standards. This topic includes one minor change to the code. The proposal is to ensure that references to the Transportation Master Plan are up to date and to delete one of the figures in the zoning code and move it to the Transportation Master Plan. That particular figure emphasizes car-oriented planning, and the suggestion would be to replace it in the Transportation Master Plan with a figure that better reflects the transportation planning that occurs in Redmond today. Thank you again for your interest in transportation topics. Please contact me at jchurchill@redmond.gov or by phone with questions and for additional information.